Broc Glover here in Denver, Colorado at Empower Field at Mile High. We're getting ready for the round 16 of the Monster Energy AMA Supercross Championship and round 9 of the 250 West and the Dunlop Motorcycle Tires Track Walk. And I have co-host none other than Nick Way. You're a third all time with the most starts in AMA Supercross and Motocross. 395 times you've raced a pro race.
That seems excessive. I love dirt bikes, but I guess I didn't know that much.
You didn't know when to quit, huh?
Yeah,
that's crazy, Nick. That's a long time, and I'm so glad to have you with me today doing this track walk. So let's get going here. You might notice we got a little bit of wind in the background. It's a little windier than usual up here, but we are at Mile High at 5,200 plus feet, and you know, the weather is very dry, and the first thing we noticed when we got down to the track today was how much sand that the Dirtworks crew brought into this racetrack.
Well, they told us there was supposed to be a sand section after the finish line jump. They scrapped that section as a whole, put it on top of the dirt to mix it in. So obviously with the wind is always kind of a factor at this event. Yep. Plus the dirt's always pretty hard pack and kind of silty. So when you can add some sand to it, definitely adds the ability to keep the moisture in the ground, and they've definitely done a great job. Which you hear the tractors out here now because they're trying to loosen it up so they can get water into the ground overnight.
Yeah, they're waiting a little bit. The sun's starting to set. I mean, the days are getting longer now, so we get towards summer. So they are, as you mentioned, they really turned up the starting line area. It's a long start, not quite as long as last year when we were here, but it is 250 feet until this first corner. Is it, when you raced, did you like longer starts or shorter starts?
Well, I think every racer would like a longer start, because certainly it definitely, you know, it's a little bit more fair behind the gate, and then get a little bit more separation before you get into the first corner. But we've seen with the incorporation of the grates, it's becoming so close that I think the longer starts are definitely a bit safer and get everybody through there a little bit better for sure. So I think the start looks good. It definitely looks fair. As in, like there's a lot of gates. There's probably 10 gates where you can hole shot from, I would guess.
Yeah, looking back at it, it's a very, very straight, even start. This floor at Empower Field is different than the other stadiums. The surface is a smaller football stadium, but also it's a kind of an egg shape, meaning right at the 50-yard lines, it's a little wider, but they can't really put curved straightaways, so it does cut down on the footprint. But the one thing about this year's track, last year, the track here was the shortest Supercross track of the entire 17 rounds. It was just over 1,600 feet. This year they've added 270 feet to it, so we're over 1,900 feet now, which is really good because when the riders do so many laps on a short track like that, I mean, lap times last year were in the 40 seconds. This year, I'm guessing mid-50s.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I didn't realize that, because obviously it looks big, the stadium being open and everything. Alex told us that this is the smallest floor of the year, so yeah, definitely if they can get the lap times near 50 seconds, that would be the goal for sure.
Yeah, you look at this stadium and you think about all the Denver Bronco games and all the, you know, you see all the blue and orange here. I mean, it's a big stadium. 76,000 fans can be in the stadium, so it does look massive, but then you realize the floor is not that big. So coming into this sharp 180 first corner right here, directly into an obstacle, but behind us is a set of whoops that's going the opposite. We'll talk about that later when we get over there, but it's kind of an interesting, very tight corner before they do almost a pure 180 and go backwards down the starting line. But this option, this section here, the riders got to check it out during press day, and we got to see some different options of the riders running, either, you know, hitting this first one, jumping up onto the table and clearing, or a few guys were trying to downside this table and then go straight into the triple there. So.
Yeah, this is a very unique obstacle for 2024 Supercross, the kind of the shelf tabletop.
Yep.
Obviously adding options, potentially could jump across onto here, but it doesn't look like that's probably possible because it's so far. But looks like on-off double's probably going to be the most efficient and consistent line here. But the thing that I noticed right away is the sand on top of the dirt.
Yeah,
and obviously with the water, they have more sand up to the side that they're storing to add on later. Yep. But it's definitely going to hold the moisture, and it's going to be, I mean, in years past it's been so blue groove. This should be definitely an upgrade.
I do. You can see here where they've added the sand. They dumped sand loads here.
Yep.
And then the riders, so it's, the water does sit down in the middle of the transitions. When they water it heavily, the sand kind of washes down, so they have to really do kind of more of a light mist so they don't wash the sand down into the bottoms. because then it gets really ruddy. But it's, you know, this section here, again, some guys were downsiding it in press day, and then they were hitting that and tripling into the corner. So you have basically 3-footers in a row here, and the other riders were coming off the table, clearing, and then just doubling into this corner, because immediately afterwards, now do you remember, this is the second corner of the start too.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about this obstacle out of the first corner is it's most likely you're gonna go off. And there's a lot of times with everybody with the great starts, the start hooks are so deep. You'll see, obviously we're working, this is the elite of the elite riders. So there's gonna be 3 or 4, 10 people during the day that are gonna go off that with their start hook down, if you can imagine that.
Yeah, that's not, doesn't sound that much fun there if you got your starting device locked down trying to hit that on-off section there.
Yep,
so
exactly.
You want to be able to brake hard enough coming in the first corner to release it. But into this 180 right here, I mean, the 180s do offer a passing opportunity. The more you see the 180s on the courses, we have a couple of 180s out there too without berms that I think are going to be fun to watch too.
Yeah, and this is a great section. This is obviously not super technical, but this berm is made really soft to be rutted.
Yep.
So it's going to make it technical and slow it down, which would add to the lap time for sure. And then this is just going to be a standard on-off here, which is going to emphasize your corner speed and then pushing through the triple. Well, that's where Broc would get it upside down with his turn down.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. I'd be flicking it down on you. So the one thing you might notice, there's a lot of wind down here. There's not much we can do. The forecast is for 20 to 25 mile an hour winds for today and tomorrow. So hard, again, we talked about that and emphasized the fact that trying to get enough moisture in this track is going to be a big challenge. The wind is even supposed to get harder on Sunday. By that time, we'll be out of here. Open stadium. Not much of a chance. They said there's a very small chance of a brief thunderstorm tomorrow, but most likely it won't happen. So again, you know, a lot of sand in the dirt. You can feel it in the section. They had a track map originally showed a full sand section. You mentioned that earlier, Nick. They really just opted to utilize that sand and just incorporate it into the track, which I think was a wise move.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, on the second lane, on the track off of the start, the triple's always a little bit risky, because everybody's so close, but this obstacle, and it's gonna separate enough. This is obviously like a basic section, so everyone's gonna be doing the same rhythm, so they should sort themselves out here before the triple. So this is obviously, this is the most responsible way to do this section so close to the start.
Yeah, nobody's gonna come out of that and try to downside, because there's no advantage at all. It's actually a disadvantage to downside the table, single this into the base of a triple. Again, as you mentioned, single onto the table, off the table.
And that one in particular has a lip, and it's like a further gap. So even on a 450, there's no chance of going forward.
Yeah. So you talk about the 450 and the 250s. The first thing I noticed when I got down here for press day today was just, you know, I ran into Justin Brayton. He and I were talking and going, you just really can tell. You can tell the sound difference of the bikes here being up here at 5280 in elevation. They just don't have that rip, that crack that you're expecting to, you know, or you're used to hearing from a finely tuned bike. And even with the EFI and the electronics that they can make more torque, the bikes just seem a little lazier, and the riders you see, it took them a little while to adjust to that.
Yeah, and essentially it makes the engine have less compression. Yeah. So less hit. Obviously they're going to be fast, but definitely not as responsive as the boys are used to. But certainly, like in the last few years, even with the EFI, I think all the teams definitely make changes for elevation now.
Well, last year my track walk co-host was John Tomac. Ironically, you guys were born about 25 miles apart from each other.
Yeah.
You're from DeWitt, Michigan, just outside of Lansing. And John was born just to the northeast of you. But one of the things he mentioned that when Eli, because he practices so much up in Colorado, that they do add compression to his practice bikes to make it feel more similar to what a bike would feel at the sea level.
Good information. I always wondered that, because obviously you would come from, if you're him, you go to the race and your bike feels faster and there's more grip, then it would be like you'd be a little bit uncomfortable. I was always surprised how he'd make the adjustments so well, because he isn't aggressive with the throttle.
Yeah, so speaking of that, it's going to be fun to see. I mean, this last year at this facility, this is where that championship run ended. So for Eli. But coming into that corner right after the triple into this sharp, we had just a 90 there.
That's a very tight 90 where
It is.
and we talked about that second lane being right off the start. So
Yep.
that could get interesting for sure off the start because that's very tight. And
So-
obviously it's like a bit, it's off of a triple, so one of the fastest sections on the track.
So I had a little bit of an advantage to watch what happened. Today was the pulp race, and it was fun to watch both of those motos, the LCQ Challenge as they were calling it. And I'm sure by now, if you're watching this, you already know that Josh Hill ended up being the winner. The first moto, they inverted the start depending on your finishing position. So the first place rider had to start dead last, and in opposite for the last place rider started first. So the riders were coming through. We got to see a lot of different combinations here. But this was a part where we had a big crash here in the first race, where a couple riders got together, and you come out of that single there and you want to jump up on top, but the best guys that we saw in press day were coming out of that corner. The Jet Lawrences and most of the top factory riders were downsiding this table, or they're on the table, jumping off and then tripling into the corner, and that was the way to go. It's coming again on here, and some were taking the inside line and they were singling. But
that's where it would get very tricky off the start, because obviously the fast line is to go outside on off, but it's pretty tough when you got 21 other guys breathing down your neck to go outside.
On, off, clear, single.
Yep.
So then the next one is a triple, because you have 4 jumps following this table right in order.
Yep.
And we can certainly feel this what adobe we have here sticking to the bottom of our shoes. But you see how the water is sitting down here at the bottom. These little areas were getting a lot of ruts and transitions, but it's not a big clay. It's not the ruts that we used to see in the Midwest. This is more of a little sandy ruts that you'd see almost in a sand track. So a little different than what we normally see at Denver.
And the one thing that surprises me though is that they can get so much out of the sand that they had already ordered for the sand section, because it's, I would say probably 3 inches thick.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yep.
So that's a significant amount of sand.
Well, I think right here it's even sandier than other parts, because the sand was originally probably dropped off here.
Yep.
And instead of being in that lane, they just moved it over to here. So coming into this corner here, got quite a bit of water down. Again, the track, Dirtworks crew working on the track. With the pulp race running, it kind of put them a little bit behind, but we definitely want to get the track walk done before sunset. So we're doing that now. So what do you think of this corner right here?
Well, this would be tricky, because obviously going 3 into this turn is tough to set up for doing anything out of this turn because you're going so fast.
Right.
But it's hard for me to say exactly, but going 3 onto this tabletop looks like a stretch.
Yep.
So it may be like it's obviously makes the beginning section, an alternate line available, because roll onto the tabletop, instinctually I think that would be quickest. But because going double, tabletop over one, you're going to get a lot of air. So I think this is definitely open up for alternate lines and probably race really well.
Well, the one thing about having witnessed this in press day and watching the top guys do that, you just came in and didn't have that luxury. I'm telling you, you got it right. So yeah, coming through the corner here, there was nobody going all the way onto the table.
Yeah.
That's a little too far, especially again, we don't really have the power available here in Denver that we do at sea level.
Yep.
So coming onto that roll, some of the guys were jumping up on and then off to the table, off table 1 over, and then tripling, avoiding, because it goes 3, 3, 5, 3, 3, 5. So it has that every third one is a 5-footer.
Yeah.
So the riders are trying to avoid that 5-footer.
Yeah, it looks like the main line probably is roll, single onto tabletop, off, 3, 3.
You got it. That's right.
But certainly I would definitely keep your eye out for the elite riders, especially Jet Lawrence as the day evolves tomorrow, because if you can go 3 out of this corner onto this tabletop, that's going to be a big advantage.
Yeah, okay. So now you're working with riders, and you've got one retiring with Adam Cincerello. He's retiring.
Yes, sir.
You still work with Joe Shimoda, right?
Yep.
And who are other riders that you work
Cameron McAdoo.
Cameron McAdoo.
Yep.
So you have 2 guys that have been good contenders. One of the things we did talk about with Joe, I think a lot of people thought, oh, he came off his outdoors, he's getting on HRC, the Honda HRC team, and he's going to come and light it on fire. But you mentioned that Joe really didn't have as much Supercross experience as some people might have thought. So,
well, for sure, and he's 21 years old now, which obviously is like almost young for the class now.
Yeah.
Obviously, like Jet's doing super well in the 450s, but it seems to be like, the people that he's racing are older. And then he missed most all of last year with injury. He raced, I think, 3 races. He got a second at Nashville, which was a good race for him. But just not a lot of experience in Supercross, to be completely honest with you. So his riding has evolved, but he just needs to continue to, improve his race craft. Yeah. So I think as the season's gone on, he's done better. He's been riding really well all season, but his starts have improved, and certainly the goal for him is to get a win before the season's over.
Let's talk about this 250 West Championship right now. It is tight. Obviously, Levi Kitchen had a big crash the last time we saw him in Nashville, injured some ribs, just starting to get back, had to take a week off, get back riding. Looking at the results here, last year in the 250 West, Jet was trying to wrap up that championship, so maybe he wasn't on his A game and he finished 3rd. But the rider who won last year here in the 250 class, RJ Hampshire, and who was 2nd? Levi Kitchen.
Levi Kitchen.
So the 2 riders that are in the championship battle, separated by just a couple of points, are the riders who finished 1st and 2nd here last year. So RJ's enjoying that red plate on his bike right now, and I think Levi'd like to take that thing away from him before we go to Salt Lake. And Salt Lake being the showdown, anything, as we see, the last time we had a showdown in Nashville, anything can happen.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
It brings a lot of elements in there. So.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely worth noting, because when those 2 riders drag wheel their gear bag in here tomorrow morning, they're going to remember that they battled each other last year. And I remember that race specifically last year. Hampshire was amazing in the whoops.
Yep.
Typically, this track, like we talked about, the dirt firms up, and so the whoops stayed as to be blitzers.
Right.
This year, the way the track is, it looks like it's going to be tough to blitz them with the setup.
Yep.
So, I think last year that was definitely a determining factor for Hampshire, but also Kitchen seems to be, amazing with his whoops, whether you're jumping or blitzing him. So I think they're pretty even.
Yeah, it sounds like we're all excited to watch, no question. So coming through this, looking back at it a little bit, the tabletop there, the quick line was on the table, clear the single, and then take off from that one, clear this 5-footer that we're on, and land on this 3, downside here, and then here off of this 3, clear the 5 and the other 3 behind it, and there's a little bit of a knob behind that small bump that was in the corner, coming into the corner, but we'll see the Dirtworks crew look like they've added a little bit to that. So yeah, it's still just kind of like a pre-whoop coming in the corner.
Yep.
Before we go into the 90 there.
If anything, that'll just disrupt the bike enough to slow the corner down.
Yeah.
Really won't affect like hitting the jumps by any means.
I did catch the tail end of Jet trying to quad this and to try to clear this, and he clipped it going pretty fast, and he didn't quite make the corner all the way. Didn't crash or anything, but it was I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to clear it and makes it tomorrow, but it was something that he thought about. So
yeah,
into a 90, and right now on this track, the position, we're heading right now into a 90 directly in front of the starting gate. So this is where they added that 270 plus feet by running back and forth. We actually go 3 times down into a right 180, into a left 180, and then back into a 90 into the whoops. So, well, speaking of somebody we've been talking about, hey Alex, how are you?
So, how are you?
Alex Gillespie from Dirtworks. So Alex, tell us, and we'll try to pick it up on the mic the best we can with this wind. But
okay.
So how many loads of sand did you guys bring in, and did you take all of, we were thinking that you took most of it from the old sand section that we had on the map.
Yeah, so the sand section in the back was 10 loads. We still got 10 loads, we just didn't do a sand section. Yeah. So we just top coated the track with a little bit of sand, because this dirt is such a hard clay. I mean, the blue group here is like no other Supercross. So we kind of mixed it in, and as the press and the pole race went on, it's slowly disappearing, but what it gives us is a little bit of loam, a little bit of loose stuff to pack in the ruts versus struggling all day race day. It's still a struggle, but it helps.
Well, we appreciate your input on that, and let us know, because there's no question with this wind, it's kind of fighting. I know your crew's trying to put water in the best they can, but with the race even forecasted to have some wind tomorrow too, you guys are going to be busy as anybody.
Yeah, with the wind here, and if we have a sunny day, it's a struggle.
Well, 16 rounds into this, you got one more to go, and thank you for all the hard work. I think if people had any idea the hours your crew puts in, it's incredible. And then when it's all done, you got to tear it out and move on to the next town. So thanks for everything, and I appreciate it. Thanks, Alex.
Didn't rain on the build.
Yeah.
Didn't rain on the build.
Didn't rain on the build.
It was mud last week.
Yeah. Well, good point there, Nick. It was, I mean, so many times this year, it was raining when they're trying to build the track, and they having to try to rush the track in, get it covered, and they're just watching every single weather forecast they can possibly and trying to see which one's the most accurate and time their build. So if there was a window at midnight that they were going to be able to build, these guys are building at all hours that they didn't matter. So it's incredible.
And another detail that Alex just told us is that probably has helped the track is that it rained last weekend when they had a Monster Jam event. So the dirt's been sitting out, got rained on, which obviously helped them get water into the ground, which is a lot of the reason for the sand. So I think that's definitely helping the conditions as well.
Yeah, perfect. So across the starting line, looking back there, if you would, Derek. So you're coming out of a 90, shooting right across the starting line into a big right-hander. Happens to be our Dunlop 180 bull corner right-hander. Onto a little quick jump across the starting line, and then we're going into the Monster Energy 180. So you go into a 90, from a 90 to a 180 into another 180. So this should offer some good passing opportunities. And first one's a right-hander, the next one's a left.
You would think this is a pretty basic section, but they had something very similar to this at St. Louis, and it offered some fireworks, folks.
Exactly. That's the thing. You give the riders a wide enough track, simple enough to where they're not racing an obstacle. Trust me, they can come in with some good semi-clean block passes.
Yeah, but they're basically going to come back across in front of the mechanics, and then if you're setting a rider up to pass, you're going to basically do what you can to set a pass up in this. Stay close in the right, set a pass up in this left, which would enter into the whoops here, which you could basically solidify a pass. So this is going to be the place for where most of the action happens, in my opinion.
You got it.
From here to the finish line.
So I want to brag about you a little bit. So you raced from the first time you ever started racing was in 1997, was it?
Yep.
Turned to pro, and your first race was at Binghamton, I believe.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Broom Tioga. And then your last race, you just did a couple of one-offs on the beginning and the end of your career in 2007. No, 17.
Yep.
17. 20 years, sorry. Then I looked back at some stats. Not only did you start 395 times, my math, and I give or take a few, you were top 10 205 times in 395 starts. It's almost 52% you were a top 10 guy. So that was an impressive stat in my mind.
Yeah, and your stat sheet I was pumped about was like the 52 top fives or something in the big bike class, which is obviously where I spent most of my time racing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spent a lot of years being very serious about my prep, and obviously I love dirt bikes. But yeah, my first year racing pro was fresh out of Loretta's and raced the last two races for Mitch's team.
Yep.
And then the last race that I raced was in 2017, and I only raced one time because I still had national number 27, and my son also raced amateur day at Redbud. Okay. So we both raced the same day, which was cool. And so that was like some nice closure for me. But yeah, in between time, I got one win at Millville Outdoors. I got second a few times at a Supercross. Shared podiums with Carmichael and Stewart in the big bike class, which I'm proud of.
That's amazing.
Yeah, raced for a long time, and I'm happy to still be out here.
So kind of stalling for a moment right now. We got the water truck in the next corner. So So you talked about number 27, your son Vincent. So Vincent has worked his way up through. He's got some factory support from the Rockstar Husqvarna team, right? And then he's running super minis.
Yep.
And he's got one more shot at Loretta Lynn's. One more shot at Loretta Lynn's in the super mini, and then he'll have to transition to the big bikes. Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, there's a lot happening for us with Vincent's racing because we're in a transition time from mini bikes to big bikes for sure. But yeah, like we were talking about, the Dirtworks guys, they're not messing around. They're working a lot out here.
No, part of the reason why we're having to do this, again, the pulp race kind of cut in 2 or 3 hours of their prep time. So now is when they're getting their work done that they normally would have already had done by now. So coming in the corner, we talked about the third time across the start into the right-hand corner, and this here, where these whoops are actually holding up pretty well. We can see the nice part is they didn't prep it since the pulp race, so they had 2 motos of 20 plus riders, so we got to see 2 heats here. So they actually have held up quite well right here, and you don't have a lot of time to get a bunch of speed, so blitzing these are going to be harder than I think if you had more of a run.
Well, the thing is like during this pulp race, it would have been the time where blitzing them was better because they're not as round from them prepping them a couple times during the day.
Right.
So they're sharper, which makes them, when you jump them, you get higher.
Yep.
So it's like there's less room for air as well. So it looks like most everyone was blitzing them out of this 90-degree setup, but I expect them by race time to be outside. You could blitz them to try to make some time, but I would expect you'd be able to go inside 3-3-3 and then set up for this flat corner after them and probably not lose any time nor position.
Okay. So one thing that was very interesting to see during the pulp race, when the only time they used the whoops, because in press day they don't ever use the whoops because they want to hold them together and keep them in the best condition possible. But they were going outside, and the guys that were blitzing it the best they could, they were coming in this nice tight little corner here, this 180. They were coming in with a little bit too much speed. So they tried to entice guys to come out here, lowered it a little bit inside, but the riders who were they were shutting off, kind of bumping into the last one, slowing the bike down, using it to scrub speed, staying tight was the call here. But this was a fun corner because a lot of this dirt got pushed off and got to be a cushion. Yep. So you had people kind of sliding at the beginning of it, trying to square up. You had guys coming real tight, trying to block anybody from getting underneath them, but then they would drift wide. So you had some inside-outside moves here as they headed down diagonally and backwards on the starting line before they come to the finish line corner.
Yep, and to your point, Broc, I think this is where most of the excitement for the racing comes from.
Yep.
Because the base of the dirt is super hard packed, so blitzing is going to be faster, but exactly to your point, you're going to end up further outside. Where if you jump them, you're going to be able to stay tight and be able to like basically cover both corners for a pass. You're going to have to be that much faster to go outside and blitz. I would expect guys like Tomac and Jet Lawrence to blitz these. Cooper Webb's going to stick to his strength and jump these. I expect in the 250 class, Hampshire and Kitchen probably to blitz them to start with. Hampshire seems to have transitioned to jumping them being his strength now. So we'll see how it develops. They're definitely, everybody's versed in doing it either way, but this year it's been pretty one-sided, jumping to be better, but I think this track will lend to blitzing, but then again, you're going to end up making the track way longer and going outside, so we'll see how it develops.
So talking about this right here, we just walked through what looked like dirt clods. Well, they had the big cat out here, and they were zigzagging back and forth trying to have the tracks tear up the dirt. They applied a bunch of water, and now this equipment here with Corey's he's running a groomer, so now you're fluffing the top. So they tore it up, they put a bunch of water on it so it seeped down into the surface, and now they're just running, as you can see right there, Derek, if you zoom in, you can see right there what Corey's doing in on the kind of loam. You come from farm area a little bit. What's that piece of equipment called?
Well, that's a skid steer, but then they have this thing on the front that's like it looks like a bit of an aerator of some sort.
Yeah,
but I think it's traditionally made to catch rocks, which they've had one at High Point forever because it smoothed the ruts out.
Exactly.
But they're basically just trying to, like you said, get the dirt turned over and the moisture as deep as you can so we don't get to a blue groove section and just have some moisture on the top.
Well, you can see right here where some of the dirt, when they apply the dirt, you can see right here where it doesn't always sink in. So they'll put more and more water on it and try to get the moisture all the way through it in a uniform manner. So coming into this corner here, not quite a 180 with kind of a quarter berm, but this is the final corner before the finish line right there. And in the pulp race, we did see action in this
100%
corner.
There's action here. This is obviously a tight corner, but there's not a lot of depth from where you are to Derek. And then they're basically making this enticing to go inside by having this roller, but you could also lose the front on acceleration pretty easily. So it's obviously it's probably like most consistent to hit the outside, but again, you don't want to leave the inside open.
So 450 championship. Mathematically, Jet could wrap it up. Probability of him doing that, not so much maybe, right? So you got Cooper Webb, you got Eli Tomac in there, 2 Yamaha teammates. Chase Sexton is starting to come within his own. He rode really, really well last week in Philadelphia. I'm sure he's like to get another win here this season. And it's going to be interesting to see how aggressively Jet rides. Again, last year when he had a championship on the line, he probably rode aggressively enough, but didn't hang it out overly mounted. So I think with the 450s here, you know he wants to go away with the lead in going into Salt Lake, and the chances of him having a 25+ point lead or having a championship is not.
To your point, I agree that I think that Jet Lawrence's competitors are definitely going to be more aggressive than they've been. Sexton's been riding. Sexton's been riding really well as of late, and obviously Tomac has announced he's going to ride the outdoors, which means he has plenty of motivation in his racing at hometown crowd. Cooper Webb obviously is motivated to try to close the points gap, so I think we're going to be in for a heck of an entertaining race.
Well, let's talk about Colorado's own Eli Tomac. Was that a surprise to you that he said, made this announcement this week that he's going to do the outdoor championship?
Well, I think that as the season's gone on, you and I have both seen him progress.
Yeah.
And probably it's obviously it takes a lot of time to get to this level, so missing the bulk of last season's outdoors definitely, and then prep for Supercross, shorter off season definitely hurt his prep. And so I see him progressing, so I instinctually I think that he'll race again in 25.
Okay. Yeah, wow.
And I think that him racing outdoors is another indicator that he's going to keep racing, keep improving, and show up at his best in 25. That's what I think.
Well, that's it. Interesting. I'm looking for a way down here without going down more ways than one.
I'm going for it.
Good.
I'm going to keep it moving.
Supercross speed.
It's all about the momentum, Broc.
It is, man. You got the track walk shoes on for sure. So this section was a combination that showed a lot of options also. I'm not even 100% sure what was faster. I watched it many, many times. Some riders were jumping this, railing the outside, and then as you see the next section, through this corner, the outside riders here were able to single clear the 4 or 5 footer, and then you got a single afterwards. The other half of the riders were coming through here, and it looked slow in the beginning because they were just kind of singling here, and then hitting the larger jump in order to clear, what is this, a 2.5 maybe? 2.5, 3, almost 5, and then the other one looks like about a 3.5, 4. So the riders that were rolling the inside were hitting this and then clearing that. Well, since then, Dirtworks has built up that knob on the inside, and that whole new section there has changed things dramatically. Now they're kind of forcing the riders who single, double on here, carrying this much speed. Will they go outside and hit the jump and launch over towards the first corner or not?
It definitely opens that up. Instinctually, I think they're going to just hit the finish line jump, go around the roller, keep momentum up. Like you said, bounce into the takeoff of this one, get the bike angled here and go here. But again, the details these guys put into this every week it's not always noticed, but they just put this here.
Yep.
Which basically puts the outside in play where Derek's standing.
Yep.
So then it's not just super one line on the inside on both 90s.
Yep, because the guys who are landing over the first one, so they were double jumping the first tall and then hitting this, were landing right at the base, trying to land kind of at the base of this. Yep. But with this knob here, right here, it might have made a little more sense to have it a few feet this way, but we'll have to see. And if they need to move it, they'll move it. So.
Yeah, and essentially that roller after the finish line is to try to get people not to just be on the outside, or basically because everyone would have went just to the inside. So it's pushing people outside. So and both of these obstacles are essentially made to make it a little bit more one lines, which I think the one after the finish line is going to be outside, and then this one could be depending on how disruptive this little roller is.
Yep. So, well, we're coming into the final corner, putting a lot of water down here, and these penultimate rounds of both championships. So we have this race and one more. So this is the one where if you're leading, you don't want to do anything to throw it away.
Yep.
But if you're in the 250 with a Levi Kitchen, you got to play aggressive. You'd love to go into that final one with the red plate. And RJ Hampshire, obviously, it's same with him. He's just going to have to put his head down and try to remember what he did here last year and win the race. And so exciting and glad to be up here. It's Denver hasn't had a whole lot of Supercross. I think this is the 5th one we figured out, right? And then the first one was back in the 90s when Jeremy McGrath won at the old Mile High Stadium. And this right now, our previous winners were what? Eli, and then we had Jason Anderson, and then we had, who's also
Sexton.
coming in, and Sexton won last year.
Yep.
But we've had Jason Anderson start to pick up his pace too, so he might get in there and mix it up, and he'd like to play spoiler.
For sure, and it's ultimately, like we were talking about, the championship battle is close in both championships, but really you got a lot of like Anderson and Tomax that are champions in the past that have a lot to prove, that are coming into their own as the season is coming to a close. So that's going to be those guys could be an added factor. Yeah. I'm hoping Shimoda does well tomorrow. He's definitely prepared. So he's another one of those guys that could throw a little wrench into the championship standings there. So there's a lot of storylines to keep an eye on here in Mile High, and obviously the altitude is going to play a factor with everybody. People are going to be changing their bike a little bit all day, whether it's the gearing. Yeah. I think the surface on the track looks great. Should be a sweet day.
Well, no first-time winners ever in Denver. Jason Anderson liked to change, he would like to come in here. He has no wins this year. He'd like to get his first win. Yeah. Again, hasn't been any rider who's a first-time winner of Supercross, so that kind of almost leaves the only one, Justin Cooper, and there's not really any players that are at that probably going for that title. But I know one thing for sure, a guy like Jason Anderson would love to get his first win of the season. Again, the championship on the line. We'll see what happens out there. And again, you talked about the weather, you talked about the elevation, you talked about all that. Just doing a track walk out here, being out here for an hour or so, it's just like you just want to drink water. There's a lot of difference on your body and the bike, so it always plays a little havoc out here.
Yeah, and the boys did a great job with the track. Obviously, it's like a small footprint, and the outside of the track is pretty like a standard Supercross layout. But then from what they did across the mechanics area and then the flat corner into the whoops is going to be interesting. Obviously, the whoops are going to hold up a lot more than normal, so they're going to be like less likely to jump them, although they're going to. Yeah. And from the finish line over here is very unique with their extra effort with these little extra rollers, so should race really well.
Well, Nick Way, we really, really appreciate you taking the time out here to do this. And the Winners Take All reference, got to give you props for that, because the first time I ever met you, you laid that line on me. And I remember I wasn't even sure who was talking and who you were talking to. And you were a young kid at like a Des Moines, Iowa arena cross race. And that's the first time I ever met you, way back in the 90s.
Maybe a little cocky on my behalf, but I was probably like 15 or so. I was amateur, like riding the A class, and I went to race I guess a pro arena cross at the time, and then you were there working, and I was like, I gotta go say hi to him. He's awesome, because I'm a fan of your racing, and then I was always like, at the time you weren't super proud of it, but I've always been a huge fan of Winners Take All the movie, so I was like stoked to meet you, and I was obviously joking when I said, I gave him the line, Carl, you know how long it took me to find this place, which was his line in the movie. So yeah, ever since then he was like, because at the time he was like, who is this guy?
I didn't know even who you were talking to, but now looking back at it, we get a good laugh at it, love it, and appreciate all that you've done for the sport, in the sport, racing all those years, and now giving back. So being able to do a track walk like this, it's you get a little closer view of the track and kind of see how it is. Maybe you'll be able to help your riders a bit. So we'll have to watch your riders tomorrow. So thanks everybody for tuning in and here at Denver, and we've got one more round next week in Salt Lake, so do me a favor and please tune in next week in Salt Lake. And Nick, thank you so much for all your time, man. Thanks.
Appreciate you.